All right, we are in the Crucial Combo podcast. I'm here with my good friend Dawn Masenya. What's going on? What's the deal?
Hey, Osu, how's it going?
I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. You're freezing up a little bit, but it's all good. It's all good.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it's better now. Okay. Yeah, so all is good. How you been?
Good. Enjoying the
Y'all here living
summer.
life?
It's a little bit of living life, but
That's
enjoying the summer. I think it's definitely going to be an
definitely.
interesting year from a real estate perspective. So let's see the ride we're on.
Yeah. Yes, definitely, definitely. Well, I know that what I wanted to talk about tonight, I just wanted to go over. Was having a conversation with one of my buddies last week, and it was an interesting conversation. We were talking about black home ownership, and the number obviously being very low. It's we're the lowest group of homeowners in the country, and one of the things I was talking about with him is like some of the things that I see that end up being issues at times. Um, One of the things I talked about was, I know, okay, first of all, we have a lot of different issues that can contribute to the low home ownership rate, right? So we have a lot of legacy issues, redlining, we have racial deed restrictions, stuff like that. Lower appraisal for black home ownerships. We know about those things. So my thing was really to talk about some things that we can control. And one of the things I've seen is legacy properties that grandma, grandpa bought, mom or dad bought, and then you have that next generation come along and they're not taking care of the property. You got people just living in the property. Next thing you know, taxes are due, repairs are due. Maybe there's other, reverse mortgage there. It might be other liens on the property. Next thing you know, the family loses the property and some other group comes along. You know what I mean? And look, it's all fair. We live in America. One person's problem or tragedy is another person's opportunity. So it's fair game. But I said that's kind of one of the reasons that contributes to the low home ownership rate because some of these properties could be staying in the family. You know what I mean? So he thought it was very anecdotal, and I'm always open to everybody's opinion, but it could be I could be biased because I see it as a realtor. You see it as a realtor, but I think it's something that's a problem within our community. So I wanted to get your take on it and what you thought.
I don't think it's anecdotal at all. I almost feel like we're boots on the ground as realtors. We hear it first, right? So when you look at the things that are reported out there, we're the reporting parties, right? So when I go in and I
Right.
submit a closing or I submit all of those details that are in the closing, we're the first there. And if you're active, these are not anecdotes. So I also do think that what you just touched
Right.
on is still a legacy issue. And when you said families losing, you have to understand that the the broken legacy of families, as far as people of color in this country, I think that is the reason why taking care of a home becomes an insurmountable task. I live in a house by myself. You've seen my house. It is
Mm-hmm.
not a big house, but to take care of everything that's required by myself takes an unbelievable amount of effort. If I had a family, there would be enough
Yeah.
of the work to go around, both financially, both physically. We're talking weeding. We're talking who's gonna take care of what. Families have the capability and the capacity to do these
Right.
things, in a much better capacity than if you did not have a family, right? So I think that just the history of
Yeah.
not
Definitely.
having, families taking care of things and it falling on the shoulders of one person, I think that that's a huge contributing factor.
Yeah.
I see that changing, but I see it
Okay.
changing because, and I'll tell you why I think that that's going to change. The interesting thing is now
Mm-hmm.
that in order to afford a house, you have to bring multiple siblings now, mom, dad, multiple siblings now. I have a good example of this on my block, on a property that, I sold. I was
Okay.
both on the list side and the buy side. They, without
Okay.
realizing it, because it's four siblings, a couple of grown kids, the big house, they get to spread around the responsibility, and they're actually doing it. So I think
Right.
that things break down where there's too many people living in a house and only one person is shouldering the burden for it, for the maintenance,
Right.
for the cost, and all the things that entail taking care of a home. So I think that the example that you're talking
Right.
about, gentrification at the root of it, the only way gentrification works is when something becomes insurmountable for whoever owns that property, right? That's the only way that it works. Or when the folks that
Right.
the person whose shoulder it falls on is no longer there to take care of it. What then happens? Now someone has to,
Right.
pay the taxes. Now someone has to do all kinds of things that they're not accustomed to doing, which I think is very problematic. And that's a cultural issue that needs to shift.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and that's something I was talking about with him because I was like, the thing is that so we had two different points of view. So um, the discussion was like, okay, is that a estate planning issue? Now both could be true what I'm getting ready to say, but is it an estate planning issue, or is it the fact that we haven't prepared the next generation properly to continue to
Well,
take care of the property? Um,
both.
I tend, I think it's both, but I tend to say, okay, if grandma wasn't great at or grandma or grandpa was not great at estate planning, okay. But if she bought the house, 30 years ago or whatever the case is, and we got grown people living in the house who are living there now, everybody has a car, everybody has a job, presumably, or enough people have a job. My thought is like by default, we should just be stepping up to make sure, okay, let's carry on because we got to pay to live somewhere. So that's my school of thought, but a lot of times I don't see that happening. You know what I mean?
The Black American experience is, especially when you're trying to raise children in Black America, the Black American experience is to try and give your children or the next generation an easier life than what you had. I feel as though that's been taken to an extreme, right? That's why you have a lot of
Okay.
young people living in homes, and nothing is required of them except to do the things that bring the parental figures joy, right? Oh, you're doing great in basketball, you're doing
Yeah.
great in school. That's all I'm going to put on your plate because life has been so hard on me. And I think that it comes at a cost when
Yeah.
you remove those types of responsibilities from children because you don't want them to have it as hard as you. And we do come, this culture is very participation trophy heavy, right? But I think that culturally Black people
Hmm.
did not want to overburden their children. And unfortunately what that means is you don't know how to cut the grass. You don't know how to fix things. You don't know how to, you don't know how to
Mm.
maintain a house. So I think that also is a lot of why when the person who has been shouldering the responsibility is gone, there's no one left that knows how to do it. So that's a lot of what I
Yeah.
see. I mean, look at how excessive it is when we're throwing these kids these 16-year-old birthday parties. Why? What have you done at 16 to be treated like
Right.
you're the King Midas? Nothing. You've done nothing. You
Right.
graduated school,
Right.
right? And again, I'm biased.
Yeah.
I'm an immigrant, right? So we didn't celebrate nothingness, right? And when we did big
Right.
things, it was great job, and that was it. And that was it. But in this
That was
country,
it.
because
Yeah.
but in this country, because of just the history of this country, I think that you had people that wanted to make sure that their children did not experience what they experienced, and I think that it came at a cost, and it was an
Okay.
overcorrection.
Okay. That's a great perspective on it because I tend to be a little hardline with my point of view, and I feel the same way. I feel like, yeah, we babied a lot of the
A
generation,
whole
so we end
generation,
up
yeah.
having a next generation that grows up. Maybe they have kids, and now we have one generation that has kids, all living in this legacy house, but nobody can take care of it. And I saw a lot of um, examples of this just as a realtor myself. Like I saw situations where there were a three-family home and we had all these different family members living there. Nobody's paying any rent, but it was like one particular person who was a client of mine. She was the one who was maintaining the property and she got sick of it. And she's like, I'm out of here. I'm
I'm
gonna
done.
go rent somewhere. So she left and said, I'm gonna go rent. And then I think mom passed away and she left the house, and of course in New Jersey it obviously goes to the children first, right? So there was like four siblings. I think all the siblings wanted to sell other besides one sibling. So it's like we're not going to sell the house, but we're not going to maintain it either. And it just went into foreclosure, and it was just
Yeah. Oh,
unnecessary. You know what I
oh
mean?
my God.
So it's it's sad to see, and it's not the first. It's not the first one. You know, I've seen many of those. Um, and I know you deal with a lot of bank-owned properties. I know you don't know all the stories of every situation, but
It's the same story.
that is, I mean, it seems pretty same
It's
story,
the
right?
it's the same story. You know, one person can't shoulder it all. How do you lose a great asset like a home? Because these are not markets where it's like the property is somewhere in some obscure part of the country. You know, these are robust markets, right? There's
Right,
no reason why you couldn't have maintained the value of the property by maintaining it. But again, it's a combination of all of the things that we're talking about, including that estate planning piece, which a lot of older folks in our communities don't talk about what the mortgage looks like. That's none of your business, right? And then now you pass away, we're rushing trying to find the
right,
paperwork, and nobody knows a what your intentions were. Nobody knows where to find the instructions.
right.
You're much more heavily taxed when you don't do that estate planning piece, and it becomes a mess for folks to
That's
try
a
and
great
figure it
plan.
out once you're gone. And I think that is
Right.
by and large a combination of all of those things. It makes it impossible for the folks that you're leaving behind to be able to maintain the property. And they just want the easy way out. All right, at this
Yeah.
point we'll just sell it. And so it's an unfortunate piece, but that is unfortunately something that's prevalent in our communities. That is not prevalent in other communities. Other communities know how to talk about their estate plans. They talk
Right.
about wills. They talk about trusts.
Yeah.
Those things are established when their children are born. They're not
Right.
established when I'm
Right.
close to the end of my life and I have to start thinking about these things. With each birth of
Right.
a child, they go back to the estate planning attorney and they make those adjustments and they make those accommodations because you never know when you're going to
Yeah.
go. So that's just one of the ways that I
You never
think that
know.
we have, that we kind of are behind the ball. But I see a lot of more conversations happening about estate planning and trust and how people can kind of make sure that their last will is actually executed. So hopefully that will continue to become something
Yeah.
that's spread.
Well, and that's so true as far as estate planning, and that was something that my friend, we were talking about that, and that was his point, was that it was really more of the fault of grandma, grandpa, or mom or dad, whoever bought the house. But my thought was that, okay, yeah, I see the estate planning point, but I guess my point is that, okay, once you become grown, you have to pay to live somewhere at some point. So in that scenario that I saw, which was one of many, like I said, everybody was scattering to go rent somewhere. And I'm like, you guys are going to pay to live somewhere else anyway. Now you're paying somebody else that isn't even from your community. Now you're paying somebody else anyway. So why not just pay and use your resources towards the house that you're in? But
Well, it's a
it's
mindset.
it's just something that
It's a
yeah, it's a
mindset.
mindset.
But this mindset was by design, right? If there is
Yeah,
a mindset that's been instilled, that is the whole point of it is for, unfortunately, black and brown folks not to be able to retain property. No one was talking about grandma and grandpa about estate planning, right? Nobody
right.
respected grandma and grandpa enough to say when they purchased their home, let me recommend an attorney you should talk
Yeah,
to so that you know what to do with this, when the time comes. And
yeah,
would grandma and grandpa trust that? No, right? Because a lot of folks giving you the loan gave you a hard time at the time that grandma and grandpa bought, that property. So there's so much mistrust. And I think that people have to respect that, the reason why so much was kept close to the chest for folks that actually had something is because it was difficult to get there. There was nobody there to help them along the way.
right.
The education was not there. And it's just
Sure.
easier to say, okay, I have this thing now. It's my responsibility. I'm not going to tell anyone anything because back in the day, this was taken away from me. Back in the day, this person got screwed over. So I understand why they
Yeah,
don't want, to have these conversations and these discussions. But the time has come where
yeah.
that should change.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and I get that point. I think the thing that really irritates me is that when people are grown people grow up living in a house that somebody before them bought and don't see the value to actually maintain it. And I'm not just obviously not just talking about cutting the grass, but just paying for the property. If there's even if there's still a lien on it and something owed, whether it's a reverse mortgage, second mortgage, whatever. My thing is that come on, you got to still put some money on it because you're living there. And at the end of the day, what does it hurt you to maintain the property, especially if there's multiple family members? So that's something that I think is you know, again, I don't think it's anecdotal in our community. I really think it's something that does contribute to properties that are lost. And I see that so much. So I kind of feel like my thought is that regardless, once you grow up, and again, this goes back to my view of saying, hey, are we preparing people correctly? Are we preparing our kids correctly just to be responsible for an asset? You know what I'm saying? Just that
The
basic
answer is
point,
no.
because
The answer is no. The answer is no.
right,
No, the
right.
answer is no.
Yeah.
When like I said, when you reward um young people for doing nothing, you throw them a party for doing nothing. They don't earn anything, right? Oh, you graduated. We're
Hmm.
gonna throw you a party, right? Because there's that social pressure. Because we're too afraid for our children to
Hmm.
be singled out as the kid that has to do the chores and the kid that can't go to the party and the kid that doesn't have the party and the kid that doesn't have the nice braids. When you fear the social experience that your children are going through more than you fear not raising them so that at 18 years old you become irrelevant, I think that is a
Yeah.
major issue, and it goes to what you're talking about, because then what happens at 18, 19, 20, you're calling them grown folks. If I've never been responsible for anything, if I've never truly earned anything, if I've never truly had the capacity to be
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm not going to get everything that I want just because my friend across the street has it, I should have it too. That's ridiculous, right? But that's how we
Yeah.
justify giving our kids
Yeah. It
this
is.
excessive amount of stuff. But that is the reason why you have grown folks like you're talking about. It becomes emotionally insurmountable to even conceive of, okay, now I got to pay for a whole house. Now I got to pay for taxes. This is a lot of bills. If you've
Oh,
never
that
had
makes
the
me mad.
capacity for that, but think about it.
That
If
makes me so mad.
you have never been required to do anything, what makes you think that your kid turned 18 and all of a sudden they're going to be responsible? No, you raised a lazy kid. You raised a kid that had no chores. You raised a kid
Yeah.
that had no responsibility, that has no skill set, that was rewarded early. And I think that is what you're going to
Yeah.
see a lot, unfortunately, a lot more of. A bunch of kids that don't know how to do, and that's not just our community, much of anything.
Yeah. Sure. Well, that really is such a fact that you point on, and that's the thing that really bothers me because in our community we really can't afford for that to happen. Let's say you have that situation in another community. 9 times out of 10, like you said, there's trust in place, there's things in place as far as estate planning that will, in not in all scenarios, but in a lot of scenarios, it will take care of the lazy kid until the lazy
It'll
kid
mitigate.
gets
It'll
it. You know what I'm
mitigate.
saying?
It will mitigate the effects of a lazy kid not having the capacity, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So in that sense, okay, cool. Maybe the kid isn't ready at 22, but there's mechanisms in place that'll mitigate the
Right.
stupidness or the immaturity there, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
with us, now you have things that are coming up, things that are due, like I said, taxes, whatever, second mortgage, and no one's taking care of it, and the next thing you know, it's gone. So, in that respect, that's something I feel like we have to get rid of. And, I like to talk about problems, but I like to talk about solutions. So, you know, I do agree estate planning is an issue, but we need to teach our kids, we need to prepare our kids to maintain
What does that mean?
something that's an asset, the most
What is
important thing.
what does that mean? What does that mean? How do we
So to
how do
me,
we
so to me,
yeah.
what that you said how?
Yeah. What does that mean? When we say we need to prepare our kids, right?
Well,
What does that mean? What do we do on a
yeah,
daily? What is our kid experiencing when they're 10? What are they responsible for when they're 12? What are they responsible for when they're 15? And
right,
that's my question to you.
yeah.
What does that actually mean we are requiring of our children at these ages so that they're ready when they're leaving the nest, or they're
Well,
ready when I go and I leave them this
I,
asset?
I well, I think that one of the first, like, so if we're talking about different age ranges, so one is having responsibility to do things like chores, be responsible, possibly having them. Now, every parent's different as far as jobs or what they have their kids do for money per se. Some parents don't want their kids to work until a certain age as far as working outside of the house. whatever the case is, I don't necessarily judge on that. I know I had my first job at like 14, but but I do think that making sure your kids have to work for what they are going to get, and that can mean different things to different parents. But preparing them is helping them, one, understand finance to a certain degree, and I mean finance as far as taking care of yourself. So one of the things I understood as a kid, I grew up in America, but my parents are also immigrants, so I'm first generation here.
Yeah.
But one of the things I understood as a teenager, I understood that if you want something, you're gonna have to work for it. And we were, I have two sisters. We couldn't wait to get our own first apartments and grow up. When we got to that age, we couldn't wait to have the job that can pay for just the basic things of
Why?
having even a little. My first apartment was a small 1 bedroom, but I was
Why
so
couldn't you
happy
wait?
because it was mine and I could pay for it.
Right.
Huh?
Why couldn't you wait? Wasn't it comfortable at home? Wasn't it nice
Well,
there?
because here's the thing. So the thing with me is that I was proud. I got my first apartment. I think I was just turned 21.
Yeah.
I was proud to be a man and sustain myself. You know what I'm saying? So for me, there wasn't any pride with me staying home with mom. I mean, my father had already passed when I was 19, but at 21, there was no pride for me to stay at home. The pride for me was to say, okay, I'm out of here. As soon
Well,
as
let
I
me ask you
can,
something.
not because I wanted to leave.
Let me ask you
Hmm.
something. Were you allowed to do whatever you wanted to do in your mom's house?
Absolutely not.
But
So, just for
that's what I'm
example,
getting at.
you know,
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
absolutely.
So you
Well,
weren't
just a
allowed to do
basic thing
whatever
for
you
me
wanted
as a
to do.
man.
Right. You can't have girls come
Well,
over.
exactly. And
What's
as a
the one thing
man,
what's the one thing you want to
there
do at
you
that
go.
age? But what do
There you
you see
go.
happen? What do you see happening now? Is you have these conversations where people are saying, "Oh well, my kids are gonna have sex. They're gonna drink. I want them to do it here where it's safe," which is insane to me. Which is insane to me because
That's
you're basically
insane.
saying, but again, there's a lot of people that will make that argument, right? They're gonna drink anyways. I want them to do it at home. I want them to do it, where it's safe here. So what you're basically saying is you want to create an adult environment without the adult responsibilities. Why would they ever leave? Why would they ever leave? I was ready, like you, I was ready to get out of my dad's house. I was safe. I was sheltered. I was fed.
Yeah.
I can always go back. Will I ever go back? Hell no.
Right.
Hell no. Because even to this
No,
age, even at
because you're
this
an
age,
adult.
even at this age, there are things that I like to do that I cannot do in my father's house. So when you take that element away, you
Right.
take an element away from children growing up and preparing themselves and wanting that freedom, wanting to exercise those adult things outside of their parents' homes. So
Hmm.
I think that's it's huge.
That's a
Like you got to make
great
your kids
perspective.
uncomfortable. You got to make your kids uncomfortable. They got to want to be like, you know what? If I want a boyfriend
Hmm.
and I want to hang out with my boyfriend, I can't do that here. I need an apartment. I need to get out.
That is that is such a great point. I never even looked at it like that because for me, I just wanted. That's just part of being a man. But that's a great point
Also, you know
because
good. You
you're
know
right.
damn well your mother was not going to let you have women go in and out of the house, and that is one of the most important things that you want as a man at that age. You want that. What were y'all going to do? Sit on the couch?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. And for me personally, I didn't find pride in like bringing a girlfriend or somebody I'm trying to date
Weird.
back to mom's house. That I did
Right.
that was just not cool.
Right.
So I remember when I was like 20, I was like 20, right before I turned 21. And that's a funny age because like obviously you can't go to bars, you can't go to certain things, but you're close enough, right?
Yeah.
So I was dating this girl or kind of trying to date this girl. She was like 21, just a year older, but at the time I remember she was kind of mature. She was pretty mature, I'd say that. But the whole thing is like I couldn't wait. I'm like, I'm gonna get my own apartment soon, and there was just nothing cool about being like, let's go hang out at mom's
My mom.
house. It's just not cool,
Yeah.
not cool. So
But there are
I
many
couldn't
households.
wait. So
But there are many, 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 many households where these kids have a whole attic apartment. They have the whole basement. They can have whoever they want to come over. They don't have to do anything. So you could be laid up with your boyfriend, you could be laid up with your girlfriend. It's insane. Why would you ever leave? Why would you ever leave? If my dad allowed
Well,
me to do
look,
the kinds of things and I didn't have to pay no bills, why would I leave? I wouldn't.
well, I can understand not leaving if that's what you want to do, but I guess my thing is that once it's time to actually maintain that place and everybody's like, well, the
Yeah,
ship's sinking,
yeah,
I'm out of here. Like, that's
yeah,
just crazy to me. You know
yeah.
what I'm
No,
saying? Like,
yeah,
treating that house like the Titanic is crazy to me. And
yeah,
that's the part that I don't quite get. But you make a great point, because you're right. I guess when people are conditioned like that throughout their teenage years into their 20s, you end up having, I'm 30 something years old living at home. And I don't knock anybody for living at home. I mean, everybody has a different scenario, right? But I
right.
guess my thing is that at what point do you say, okay, I'm going to take care of the place I'm living at? At what
Yeah,
point do you
yeah,
say that and not look at it as it's mom's house, it's grandma's? No, it's your house now because you live here. And,
yeah. But if you've
it's a
never been
prime opportunity to actually own a property.
if you've never been responsible for even yourself, you're not going to be responsible for anything else. If you've never been on your own, if you've never had to be like, okay, I got to pay my own rent, I got to come up with the $10,000 that they now want in order to move into an apartment, I got to deal with a maintenance person.
Yeah,
If you've never been
yeah,
responsible for yourself on your own, I think it's almost impossible to do that. It's impossible to see the value in coming home and taking care of something else, right? Because you've just sat there and received as a child into adulthood. You've never had to say, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here early. I got to start earning money
right.
early. And because that's the thing. It's like we
Yeah,
sit here, we're like, someone said this to me, like, oh, are you going to just kick your daughter out at 18? No, I'm not going to kick my daughter out at 18. But my kid is going to work.
no,
She's going to
no,
contribute. Life is going to be very, very different for her. And
right.
she is going to be dying to leave. Dying to leave. That's
Yeah,
what my
but she'll be
parents did.
prepared too. She'll be prepared though too.
She will be prepared. And I think that, I don't have a fear of disappointing my daughter. I don't have a fear of saying no to my daughter. I don't have a fear of her feeling bad about things that she doesn't want to do, because that's life and that's what's going to
Yeah.
equip her. You know,
Yes. Yes.
what people
Yeah.
will say is
Absolutely.
I'm causing trauma and you got to take it easy on them. Life is not going to take it easy on these kids. They're not. This
No,
house and the plumbing
not at
issues
all.
and the roof that she's going to have to deal with is not going to take it easy on my kid, right?
Yep.
She needs to understand the
That's it.
value, and she needs to be good at doing hard things. And I just don't think that we
Right.
allow our children to experience hard things. So when that mortgage hits, because grandma's gone, when those taxes hit because such and such is gone, if I've never done hard things because I've just received as a child onto adulthood, this is going to be impossible. It's mentally impossible for me to even think about taking care of it.
Hmm. Well, I mean, that definitely makes sense. And just to add on to it, one of the things I was talking about with a friend of mine, we were also talking about. I was talking about when it comes to home ownership rates, right? So right now, roughly, the white home ownership rate is about 76%.
Yeah.
And then, so if you look at the Census Bureau, white Americans are about 73%, followed by Asian Americans at 63%. Hispanic Americans are at 49%, and then we're right behind at 45. So just to still on the same subject, but just to swing things a little bit on the same side. So one of the things I was talking about was, when you're going to buy a home, one of the things that I think, again, I don't know for sure, but my opinion is that I said one of the things that Hispanic Americans are doing that's causing their home ownership to rise and surpass us a little bit is that, so when you go to try to buy a home, one of the issues we have a lot of is the down payment. And down
Yeah.
payment isn't easy. I get it. There's also a stat that shows that our community, we draw from 401ks and pensions the most when it
Mm.
comes to home ownership, which is nothing wrong with it. But one of the points I was saying, I was like, well, a lot of the times we're not preparing, we're not saving enough money, and that's just a reality. So one of the points I got to, and I want to know your opinion on
Yeah, but
this. One of the
yeah,
points I got to is that.
in all
No, go
fairness,
ahead. Mhm.
those other communities, and I'm not really quite sure what the numbers are as far as the Hispanic community. Those other communities are oftentimes gifted money, down payment money from their parents. Our parents don't have down payment money. They don't, right?
No,
Because
that's true.
it's
That's
it's
true.
it's not just we're drawing for our 401ks because we're bad at managing money. We
Right.
generationally have not had the capacity to do it.
Sure. No, I totally agree with that when it comes to the white and Asian. Um, Speaking on this Hispanics, my thought was that, one of the things that they're doing a little bit more, and you mentioned, I'm not saying we're not doing it either, but coming together as family,
Yeah,
to buy property is helpful, because that's going to help when it's not just you, not just a man or a woman, or just a woman or just a man. It might be brother, sister, couple cousins,
yeah,
whatever, coming together to buy a larger property, and can come together for a larger down payment together. In addition to maybe a gift, but even just the primary parties could come together, and the down payment won't be such a struggle sometimes.
right.
But one of the things I had talked about for us, and again, I don't know if this is a big issue, but the next cost after rent would be, the next thing's going to be transportation,
Mhm,
as far as expense. So one of the things I talked about, I said, well, a lot of the times right now, I mean, the cars are crazy. The interest rates on cars, I mean, people are paying car notes that are, $1,000
mhm,
plus insurance, maybe coming out $1,200 a month. So
mhm.
I was like, one of the things we have to do is that if we are serious about expanding home ownership, we got to also look at the expenses. And the next expense is going to be the car. So I felt like that's something we needed to look at, and to say, you know what, maybe I need to downplay or downscale, whatever you want to call it, the car, and get something a little bit more reasonable. And then that way I could, save some more money, because in a lot of the rentals buildings, and again, I'm not telling somebody what they should do, but we see a lot of nice, really expensive cars sometimes in our situation, and sometimes that can be a drain when it comes to wanting to save some money to do something else. And that was something that I've seen. Maybe it's anecdotal, but I feel like it's something that we don't talk about enough, or something that may feel a little judgy. You know what I'm saying? But that's not
No,
really
but it should
my
be
whole
judged.
point. But we got to look at ways to save money.
No, but it should be judged. The feeling of, okay, I have arrived, I get to drive a really, really nice car is a very, very silly notion, right? I think we should absolutely say it is absolutely dumb for you to have $1,000 car note if you can have a $600 car note, right? But we
Right.
also make it a
Right.
lot easier. They'll give anybody a car, right? They'll give anyone a loan
Right.
for a car, right? Obviously, it's a much
100%.
smaller amount than buying a house. But if they're going to give me a car and I know I can't
Mm-hmm.
buy a house, maybe I want my car to be a little bit nicer. So that's where we have to kind of
Yeah.
exercise our own personal discretion. Like, is that still a good investment? And a lot of times, if we're not telling young kids, hey, listen, you get yourself in a car, right, and you're paying it for the next 5 years, that is going to affect your ability to buy something. But because the idea of
Right.
buying something as a young person, buying a piece of property as a young person, seems so unattainable, you might actually just make a
Yeah.
decision to buy a nicer car. I'm not going to be able to buy a house anyways.
Right.
I might as well buy a car that I like, right? That's
Right.
kind of, that'll give me the dopamine hit whenever I'm driving it past my friends or whenever people see me in it.
Yeah.
So I think that is
Yeah.
those are the types of things, that reward system that I go back to, of our kids being able to have an excess amount of rewards before they actually own them. I think that this is what also feeds into it. So it is a roundabout, not a roundabout, but I think it's a lot of different cylinders that are making it difficult to prepare young adults from achieving. One of the things that I don't know if you looked into this, is of the Hispanic numbers and of the Black numbers, how many of those homeowners happen to be immigrants? Is it a disproportionate amount of folks that are immigrants? Because immigrants are more likely to live together, are more likely to deal with the
Yeah.
inconvenience of living with family than I think Americans generally are.
Well, in the census data, they're calling them Hispanic Americans. So I'm gonna have to assume that they are, Hispanics who've grown up here. Um, but
The
and
reason
again, I could be stereotyping, but
but
Hispanic Americans tend to click up more. They tend to click up family wise a little bit more from what I've seen. So, my thought again, I don't know what makes the number higher per se. It may just be sheer numbers. I mean, Hispanic Americans make up a huge part of the American populace, and I think they might have surpassed Black Americans. Um, but I do think that part of that stuff is there's a lot of power in family, and I think that it's
yeah,
something that uh, can't be overstated. It's just there's a lot of purchasing power, a lot of things you can do with family, and a lot of times in family we're looking to do the same things anyway. We're looking to raise our kids, have a roof over our head, have some peace, and enjoy life. And it hurt my heart a lot of times, like when I said even that example of that whole group of family living in a three-family building. I'm like, if you guys came together and were focused on this property, and the property needed work, and it hadn't been maintained for a while, but if they had really come together and looked at it like that, I'm like, yo, you guys don't understand what you have. You have a big ass three family um, that right now in its condition might be worth about 450, but when you fix that joker up, you're talking about 750 easy because this was a big three family. So, there's a lot of power in family, and again, it goes back even to once you fix it up, who knows what equity you're going to have in there that could be pulled to do something else. So there's a big kind of snowball effect that I think comes from not maintaining and not looking at things like that. And I think that again, there's plenty of systematic things that have happened. I'm not one that's like get over it, pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of person per se, but I do think there's a lot of things that we have control over. And one of my things as far as preparing uh, our kids, we have to we have to make them aware of things that happen, but we also have to make sure that they are aware of things that they can control.
yes,
Because I
yes.
think, like you said, a lot of times we end up just talking about redlining and racial discrimination. These things are happening, but at the same time,
Now
we
what?
can't just be like, okay, these things are. Yeah, now
Right.
what? What
Now
what you
what?
gonna
We
do?
get it. We
Are we
know.
go?
Now what?
Yes.
Now what? What are we
Now
doing with
what?
it? Like we've done the philosophy on it. We've done the history. We understand all of that, right? The now what cannot
Yeah.
be okay. Well, politically, this particular political party is doing this particular thing. No, there's got to be a cultural shift and a
Hmm.
cultural understanding that nobody's coming. Nobody's coming.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody's coming.
There's no politician that's going to fix this problem. And to get back to your
No.
point that you're making about family, is that this is another cultural thing that I think people really don't understand. This is why I was talking about how of these numbers, how many of these homeowners are immigrants. Immigrants are people outside of America are much more family oriented as far as moving things along together. America is a very
Yeah.
individualistic society. There's
Yeah.
benefits to that, right?
Absolutely.
There's benefits to be able to
Absolutely.
shine as an individual. There's benefits to be able to
Yeah.
say I can pull myself up by my bootstraps, right? But there's a timing component to that we're missing, right? You cannot
Hmm.
at a young age go and buy a house by yourself without some kind of a family unit facilitating that, right? If you really
Yeah.
want your kids to do well, it would be incredible if when your kid came of age, you had grandpa chipping in, you had an aunt and uncle chipping in. It doesn't necessarily have to be financial. It could be a skill set. It could be, you know what, son, buy this little condo, this one bedroom condo here, stay in it. We'll make it
Yeah.
better for you. We will all contribute, right? Or as a family say, you know
Right.
what, let's buy a multi-family, a mother, daughter, something. We'll all stay in it. It's not going to be the best scenario. We don't get to be individuals. We got to deal
Right.
with each other, but it's a stepping stone for us all.
Right.
America is a very
Yeah.
individualistic society, right? And I think that individualism hurts black communities much, much more because other communities started out in these family units that were functional, that were supportive of each other. Immigrants are a perfect
Hmm.
example of that. You know, when you see
Yeah.
immigrants that are able to say, all right, I'm going to stay in the basement, you stay on the first floor, you stay on the third floor, and we're going to stay down till a couple of us can, we'll be up. We do it the opposite way. We start out as individuals, and then you think as an individual you're going to grow your
Right.
family. That's almost insurmountable. So I think it's that
Yeah.
individualistic idea of I got to go out there and do this on my own. And I really don't want to
Right.
stay with my aunts and uncles. I really don't want to do that, right? It's all about this. Who
Yeah.
cares? Who
Yeah.
told you have to like what needs to be done? You don't have to like what
Right.
needs to be done. You got to do it for a few more years, make sure that the family can benefit and you benefit from it before you move on to the next thing. But that's just not a
Yeah.
mindset that I think a lot of Americans generally have. And I think that that is harmful.
Right. Right. No, that's such a great point, and I agree with you. I think it's an American thing, but I agree with you. It definitely hurts Black America or Black people in America more because of that characteristic. Typically, does not lend for the best results in the long
Yeah.
term. So that's a really great point. And I think about it and I say, okay, well, what's really the answer? And I really feel like in those scenarios where for home ownership, right? If we want to solve those things, yeah, it might be trying to not look at things so individualistically.
Yeah.
Also cutting expenses because at the end of the day, like you said, no one is coming to solve that problem. So, and one of the things I said to my friend, I said, look, you know, we went over some numbers of home ownership during the COVID era, right? And I'll pull that up at some point, but basically, the way the numbers went, obviously, black home ownership rate didn't grow. I think it grew by about 3% from
Mhm.
2019 or 2018 through 2024, or through maybe it's 2023 after the rates went up. And then Hispanic home ownership went up about 8%. So there was almost
Mm.
three times the
Wow.
amount of home ownership increase in that time. And one of the things I said to him, I said, there's some nuances there, right? So we don't know exactly why, but my speculation was that one, it was about having enough cash down. And one of
Yeah.
the things I said is that during the, you know it like I know it, during the COVID era, one of the issues was that, you know, when you're going for a house and there's 20 to 50 offers, the problem is that whoever had the cash got the house back then.
And
It
that's what
wasn't
it
just
is.
because you were qualified and yeah, you can't. It's nothing wrong with asking for seller concession and having the minimum down payment, but the problem is that that's not going to work when you got to compete. So
Yeah.
that's when I think, you know, that may have contributed to it because, I had a few people through that era who were normal. You know what I'm saying? Who were just normal, not knocking them, just normal. They had just enough amount, qualified for just enough for whatever they were looking for, and didn't have a lot of wiggle room. And one of the things that happens is that if you aren't prepared and you're not trying to cut expenses, the problem is that when you run into that type of market, a lot of times you're going to get outbid,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's why I was really dwelling on the fact. I say, yo, we have to try to cut some expenses. And like I said, some of the things that right after rent comes that transportation, and
Right.
that car can be a really huge money pit for people, more than we realize. And we're not always talking about 22-year-olds. We're talking about people who are older. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, you know, the choices I made at 22 were different than when I was 32.
Living
And I
moderate,
started looking things different.
living
So
moder, living moderately as a person of color, right, is not cool. It's not cool to live moderately.
right,
It's not, right?
right,
There's a cultural element to, ragging on you about the kind of car you drive, right? We do that. Other cultures don't do that. Other
yeah,
cultures don't have this standard,
yeah,
and I understand the historic esteem issue, but we have to get over that. It's the now what part. I understand
yeah.
why we like
I
the
agree.
Jordan. I understand why we want to feel like we've arrived. I understand that, but we have to correct this if it means that it's suppressing our ability to build actual wealth within our families. We have to say, you know what? I get it. I'm not saying that
100%.
we beat ourselves up about it. I get why we want the Jordans
Yeah,
and we want this and we want that. But we have to have an honest conversation with ourselves as to, is that something that really we want to continue? We keep making excuses for the excess. And to your point,
Yeah.
do we clap our hands when someone is not looking quite great? You don't have the sneakers, but you're saving money. No one sees the savings, right? You don't flash your savings. No one sees
No.
the living in moderation, right? Nobody sees any of those things, but they see the flashy party. They see the vacation. They see the car. And that dopamine hit is something that I think is much more detrimental to our community than whoever's in office, and whoever it is that you think is going to
Right.
turn this ship around. So, on that note, I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of different cultural elements that need to be addressed in order for these losses, these estate losses, to no longer be sustained.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, though that's such a great point, and that's my whole position is that we understand what happened in the past, but we need to erase things. My thing is we need to eradicate certain things in our culture. I feel like there's certain things in Black American culture that we have arrived at a point now where we have the knowledge to really understand psychologically things that have happened, and we can look at things that we're doing and say, okay, some things were not in our control. Some things in another basket are in our control, and the things that are in our control, um, I think we really need to say, you know what, let's try to remove that or eradicate that or minimize certain things. You know what I'm saying? So, um, and I could be wrong, but I think we might be the number one Mercedes-Benz purchasers
That's
um,
terrible.
in the country. We might be. And again, look, I'm not here to judge and tell someone what they should drive when they should drive it, but you got to be able to look at it and say, you know what,
No,
I
but
don't
it's
know if I
unwise.
need a $60,000 car.
It's unwise. It's unwise. So it's not about
Right.
judgment, right? And I think that we have to stop doing this thing where when we tell the truth about, hey, this is not a good use of a resource. It should be okay for us
Yeah.
to say that, right? Because I think that the fear is always, oh, you're hating. People should be able to do whatever they
Right.
want. Of course, we know that you should be able to do whatever it is that you want, but I should also be able to say that is unwise, right? I should also
Yeah.
be able to
I
say
agree.
culturally, the fact that we are the number one Mercedes-Benz purchasers, right? Given the amount of financial lack in so many other areas, is unwise and is something that we should absolutely change. I
Well,
just
you're
don't.
right because statistically, you're right.
It's like, well, like, why are we holding on to that? But it's that individualistic. Well, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. Yeah, you're gonna do whatever you want to do, but I get to say that that is not going to move us forward as a community when enough of us are doing whatever we want to do, right? In the face of
Right.
you,
Right.
where are you parking this Mercedes?
Listen,
Where
I've seen
on the street?
I've seen Mercedes. I've seen Mercedes. I've seen Range Rovers. I mean, a fully loaded Range Rover is easily $100,000, easily. So I've seen them in places where I'm like, yo, I don't know. I even want to park my car on this street. So it's I've seen them. You've seen them too, and
in
I'm
places
like,
in places where I don't even want to park my non-Mercedes car on this block. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is
100%. Yeah,
happening?
exactly, exactly. So when I see that, I'm like, man, you know, what could be done with those resources that are going towards that? Because these are, leases, finance, all this stuff, and it comes to a point where it's like, man, if I agree with you, if we're not honest about it and say, you know what, where are some places where we can make some changes. Um, but you're right. I think, I'm trying to be nice here, but that's one of the things is that, when it comes to dealing with things that we're doing that may be contributing to the low homeownership rate, there's always a pushback because it's almost like, you're hating on your own people or you're saying
Right.
something that's making people uncomfortable. But it's like, yo, if you love somebody, you can only tell them the truth, and you can only help them if you tell them the honest to God truth. So sitting here wondering if there's going to be some policies, we have an election coming up. It's like it don't matter who you vote for.
It
These
doesn't.
policies, there's not going to be any policies that are going to accelerate the home ownership rate. And if we're at the bottom of the home ownership rate, our home ownership percentage, if we're at the bottom, we got to say to ourselves, okay, there's nothing historical. There's nothing that's going to be done about the historical wrongs that's going to accelerate that rate to where we think it's
Well,
going to be.
here's the truth of it. Here's the truth of it. All of these things have already been fixed, right? There are already plenty of laws against redlining. All of these things have already been fixed. Now
Sure,
there's built-in issues, right, that we're not going to be able
sure.
to get rid of, because it just means that the starting line, we're behind on the starting line. Fine, but your
Right,
Mercedes-Benz is 100% going to be part of the reason why you don't qualify for that house. 100%. Your
right.
Mercedes-Benz is going to be 100% why your tire blows out, and how much is it going to cost you to fix that tire? And are you making that decision before you're
Yep.
putting money away to put a
Mm-hmm.
down payment on a house? So there's so many,
Yep.
doing things in the wrong order is something that we can adjust. You want to buy the BMW, you want to buy the Mercedes, yes, do it after you've done these other things that are much more important and critical to your financial future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, so true. So true. And that's one of the things that is really, really important, because at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, once you buy those things, assuming you're financing, that's debt to income. As soon as you
Yeah.
have that on your debt to income, it's automatically. And so that's why I was saying, I'm like, it's not always a racial thing, because even my buddy I was talking to was like, well, black people were higher as far as getting denied for loans, and I'm like, well, it's I don't know about,
Now,
maybe historically
now
it could have been the case, but at the end of the day, it's debt to income. At the end of the
it's
day, I
math.
mean,
It's
no one's
mathematics.
going to say I'm not loaning to you because you're black. It's just that if you have a higher debt to income than someone else, you're going to get denied. You know what I'm
This is
saying? So,
this
it,
is so unpopular. What we're talking about. What we're basically saying is we're taking away this idea and this myth, right? Because the grandma story is it's different. Their experience was 100% that they had bigger hurdles, higher interest rates,
right,
just because of the color of their skin. These things have been
right.
corrected. These things have been
Yes,
corrected.
yes.
When a
Thank you.
loan officer looks at
Thank you.
your when your loan officer looks at your application, they're looking at you as a number, because they
Yep.
want to close on that loan. They get a big check if you qualify.
Exactly.
They
Exactly.
get a huge
Yeah.
check if you qualify.
I,
There's not a loan officer
right.
in this country that
Yeah.
doesn't want you to give them your business. Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
That's what I try to tell people. I'm like, there's no bank or loan officer that there's no incentive for them to turn you down. They want to give you the money, because
None
that's how they
whatsoever.
get paid. They're gonna lend you that money, and then they're gonna bundle up and sell the debt to the secondary market immediately after you buy it. So
Right.
that's how money's made. Money isn't made in the denial. So that's
The
not,
most
it's
important.
there's no advantage to it.
The
So,
most
and then
important
we
color.
also talked about
The most important color is green. In this day and age, it's green.
yeah,
That's the
green.
most important color.
Heck yeah.
So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if
We
we
listen, we
have
all we
said,
no, go ahead, go ahead. Uh-huh.
at the end of the day, if we have higher expenses, right? If we live more luxurious lives, if we have fewer savings, the numbers that we have about us qualifying for fewer loans are because of that. Do we have a history of that not
Right,
being the reason? Yes. But that's not what's happening to
right,
us now. You may have a loan officer that maybe is
right.
treating you differently. Maybe he's not picking up the phone as
Yeah.
fast. Maybe he's kind of,
Right, right.
maybe there's like some social things that he's saying to you that are making you feel uncomfortable. But he wants to loan
Right.
you the money. He wants you to
Yeah.
have, he wants you to close on that house because he's incentivized when you do that. So we have to
100%.
start telling the truth and saying, hey, no, this is a matter of us taking personal responsibility, and we can have those conversations amongst ourselves. I know that we don't like other groups criticizing us. I get it, but we shouldn't lie within our own group
Right.
about what's going on. And that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying, when you made that comment about I don't want to judge someone that's driving a Mercedes-Benz, this is not about judgment. This is about telling the truth of what it now means for your financial capability and your credit when you buy that Mercedes-Benz, what you can now not do when you're driving that BMW. We
Yeah.
should be able to tell the truth about
Right.
that. And unfortunately, we're so sensitive to criticism, rightly so, but we got to turn the corner on it and start telling the truth about what's going on. That's the way we change this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, there's no way to change it, and I'm just being nice, but honestly, that's how I feel. I'm like the things that are going on are a lot of it's in our control, and I'm of that school of thought. And I think a lot of times as you get older, you become a little bit more conservative. I was very
Yeah,
extra super liberal, and I don't mean as far as Democrat Republican. I just mean as far as very liberal, as far as just strictly focusing on systematic things. And I think that as you mature, you got to start looking and say, you know what? Okay, I understand systematic things, but personal responsibility is hard to talk about, and
yeah,
for a lot of people, not for me personally, but I just feel like for a lot of people. And I think it's yeah, by other groups, maybe it's if it's said in a disrespectful way or there's a lot of stereotyping, that's one thing. But when you get into the nuances of these things, that's where you get to the truth. And in the
right.
nuances, there's just very simple truths, about loan denial, what's going on, why are people getting denied. Same thing we talked about briefly about the subprime era. And
Right.
I was saying, look, in the subprime era between '05 and '07, or probably started in '04, but whatever, between that time period, '04 to '07, I mean, look, at one point you just had to have a heartbeat to get a mortgage,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, I'm like, yo, people knew they couldn't afford this stuff. They knew they couldn't. So it's like that was you could say it's predatory loaning, but I just feel that at the end of the day,
No, no,
I don't even like the
it was.
word predatory loaning. I don't
It
even
was.
like that. I
It
just
was.
feel like
No, it was. A lot of people made a lot of money lending to people that that did not have the capacity. I was one of those people. Like I bought my house prior to 2008. I was a student. I don't even know what documents they asked for. I can't even tell you, right? They let me buy a house, thankfully. It was a struggle to keep it and it was a struggle to maintain it. But I was a kid. Who uh, who was supposed to tell me, hey, listen, you actually cannot afford this? Who was supposed to do that? Right? The mechanisms were just not in place. These debt to income ratios that we're talking about were just not in place. So even though it's a pain in the butt, like the level of qualification you have to have, those are real guardrails. Those are real guardrails to make sure that people stay in their homes. So no, I do think that there was a lot of predatory stuff happening to put people in a position where they are underwater. I mean, the appraisal, the appraisal system was just crazy. The house was getting appraised. The value
yeah,
of the home was not there, but
yeah,
your house
appraisal,
was getting
appraisal,
appraised.
yeah,
All that era was designed to make
right.
a lot of banks very, 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 very wealthy. And so I think that
Well,
protections
I agree with that.
the protections we now have, all these disclosures that we hate sending out and signing and explaining and all of those things,
Yeah.
those are the results of that time to protect consumers, to make sure that consumers are aware of the risk, of the danger, to make sure that loan officers and real estate agents are doing their job. You only buy a house a couple times. You only buy a few houses in your lifetime. How do you become an expert in that? You don't. You never
Well, look,
do.
I can definitely respect that. So I don't want to say that it wasn't predatory, but what I'm saying is that it's not the only debt trap. I
Yeah.
mean, credit cards are probably worse than that.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
get a
Yes.
credit card at 18 at 24%, and there isn't any guardrails for that. And again, I agree. There was predatory loans as far as worldwide, nationwide, and a lot of people got into stuff. But at the end of the day, I would say, okay, in our community, I can't sit back and be like, okay, it was the subprime thing that really tore us up. It's like, again, it comes back to the fact of we got to look at it and say, okay, cool. That's another systematic thing that was out there, predatory
Yeah.
for everybody. But we can't necessarily be like, okay, we had no responsibility in it because
Well, no, but
there were
it hit
surely people who did know what they're doing.
I think any of the stuff that we're talking about that hit the country as a whole always hits black and brown people harder, right? For obvious reasons, right? So even though I do agree with you that there's an element of personal responsibility, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the assets that we're talking about, if you don't have a grandparent, a father that is experienced in owning property, who is there to guide you, right? A lot of these other groups have the guidance
Yeah.
of their parents to say, hey, this is not a good buy, right? Because they have the experience. They've owned homes for 30
Mm-hmm.
years, uninterrupted, right? And so I do think
Mm-hmm.
that, going back to the systematic stuff, but at some point we've got to turn the corner and say, yes, it exists, but it doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't. There's
Right.
not a loan officer in this country that does not want you to close on a house. They don't exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. They may not be very
Yeah. They
nice.
don't exist. Yeah.
There may be some like racial undertones that you don't like about the way that they move and they operate.
Right.
But if your numbers are good, you're closing on the loan. They're not asking you for.
They're gonna loan. They're gonna loan you that money.
And I think it's funny because a lot of my clients, they will, we all get very frustrated with how much documentation is required to close on the loan, and we somehow feel as though somehow
Yeah.
that's unique to us. Why are you asking me for all of this stuff? Do you ask everybody else for all this stuff? Yes,
Right.
actually,
Right.
yes. Yes, the
Exactly.
FHA has a list of
Yeah.
requirements. The underwriter doesn't know that you're black,
Yeah.
brown, or white, or indifferent, right? They're looking at the
And they don't
numbers.
care.
They don't care. They don't care. So I think that that's one of the things that we have to do is that we have to stop having this knee-jerk reaction in some areas. I'm not saying that all these things have been resolved in all areas, but we have to stop
Yeah.
having this knee-jerk reaction to saying, hey, listen, this is all an exterior sphere of influence, and this is all because of things outside of my control, outside of our control. Many of these things are in our
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
How much debt you have is
Yeah.
within your control. The excess in your
Yeah.
life is within your control. So those are cultural things that we have to start
Mm-hmm.
resolving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's so true. That's the main thing is I just want people to really take away from this that those are the things that you can control, those are the things we have to really focus on
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, if we don't focus on those things, there'll always be this level of, you know what, the system's just against us. It's almost
right.
a excuse to fail, an excuse
Yeah,
not to try, an excuse not to do the right things. And at the end of the day, you can't save every adult, but I feel like for the next generation coming up, they can't learn that. They can't just
we can't
learn
teach
the
them that.
discontent of
We
the
can't.
past.
We can't.
They can't move forward with that. They got to be able to move forward with like, okay, this is what happened, but this is what we're going to do with it. So
Right.
it's just like showing kids roots or showing them some slavery movie and then not talking to them because it's just
Right.
all you're going to do is pass on anger. They're just going to be
Right.
mad. They don't know how to process it. They don't know what to do with it. So, you
Right.
know, um, but I know you got a GO, so I really appreciate you. This is one of many conversations we have. I always enjoy other perspectives. That's what it's all about. Crucial conversations, just having good conversation, getting other people's perspectives. Because I think that you can't grow unless you understand other people's perspectives and get other ideas together. And
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
we agree on
Absolutely.
a lot of things, so it's easy to talk. But I love having your perspective.
No,
You
no,
know.
I as well. So I'm glad I could be a part of this. And, if someone's listening and they take something away from this, that would be, it could be one person. That would definitely be the win here. So, anything I could do. Thank you for having
Absolutely.
me.
I appreciate you, Don, always. I will talk to you later. I'll put the link for everything to find you on the gram and everything. I know you're living your best life, doing you, representing, and I know you got a lot of big things coming up down there in Philly and everything. So, you know, I know some things are under the cuff right now, but I look forward to
Hopefully you'll be
talking
a
with you
part of
some
them.
more off camera.
Hopefully you'll be a part of them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to being part of that stuff as absolutely. So I appreciate you, and I will talk to you later.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Osu.
All right, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.